For a series with 16 mainline entries, countless spin-offs, and entire offshoot franchises, why is it that we always keep coming back here? Why is it that we always keep coming back to Final Fantasy VII? While the series had always maintained a stranglehold on the Japanese RPG market through the late 80s and early 90s, it still struggled to move Western audiences in any meaningful capacity. RPGs were a niche market in the West, and one that catered more to the Tolkien and Gary Gygax crowd rather than the Art Nouveau steampunk style that Yoshitaka Amano was bringing to the table. But all that was destined to change in Christmas of 1994, when Japan released what would become one of the most iconic gaming consoles of all time. "3D was far from a new concept for video games, but it wasn't until the release of the PlayStation that it became widely accessible. While the limitations of early 3D paled in comparison when placed next to the intricate level of detail found in 2D sprites, the novelty of being able to move around in a three-dimensional space was more than enough to make up for it. So, naturally, Square decided it was time to move the Final Fantasy series from 2D to 3D, and, well, you know how the rest of the story goes. To say that Final Fantasy VII's impact was anything short of monumental would be a vast understatement. It pretty much single-handedly solidified JRPGs as a staple in the international gaming market, and its success led to, let's call it a very dedicated fan base. But in spite of, or perhaps because of its success, Final Fantasy VII had a problem. A very unique problem that could only really exist between the years of 1994 and 1999. The game was aging much faster than its impact was wearing off. These days, games age slowly, at least when it comes to graphical benchmarks. Just look at Cyberpunk. The game is pushing 6 years old, and not only does it still look good, but you'd probably still struggle to find a machine that can run it at max settings without melting a hole through your floor. But back in the day, though, this wasn't really the case. Within just 5 years, cutting-edge video games went from looking like this to looking like this. And why was that? Why did games advance so quickly back then? Well, the reason is polygons, baby! Before ray tracing and DLSS were causing $3,000 GPUs to self-immolate for the sake of their sweaty, gluttonous masters who can tolerate nothing less than 8K eyebrow textures, polygons were what it was all about. Or, more specifically, how many of them you could fit on the screen at once. Before hitting a point of diminishing returns in the early 2010s, polygons were the fastest track to improving graphical fidelity, because when a character model goes from being made up of 250 polygons to 500 polygons, you're basically doubling the quality of your model. Then when the PS2 came around just a few years after Final Fantasy VII's release, those 500 poly models suddenly became 5,000 poly models. And the results, well, they spoke for themselves. So, Square was left with a deeply beloved game that was swiftly reaching obsolescence, and as such had fans clamoring to see it rebuilt on a modern console, when the game wasn't even a decade old yet. It was hardly a rare phenomenon, and some PS1-era games even did get remakes around this time because of just how much video games had improved within such a short period of time. There was a tough decision Square had to make. Should they dedicate time and resources to rebuilding a fairly recent game for no reason other than to keep up with modern design and graphical sensibilities? Or should they instead focus on building and developing new games with new ideas to explore uncharted territory? Square ultimately decided to do neither of those things. In 2003, the newly merged Square Enix announced the compilation of Final Fantasy VII project. There would be sequels, and prequels, and sidequels, and everything in between-quels, but not a remake. And the reception was mixed. The original cut of Advent Children was a mess, and Crisis Core had problems. But they did eventually find their audience, and still maintain a presence in the modern-day zeitgeist of Final Fantasy. And then there was the other one. The third project. A game so bad that over 20 years later, Square Enix still hasn't even bothered with porting it. And that game was Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. With games like Devil May Cry introducing the world to flashy, spectacle-based hack-and-slashers, adapting that template onto a Final Fantasy game didn't seem like all that crazy of an idea, especially when you've got Vincent fucking Valentine, the cool-ass gun-toting vampire anime boy that transforms into demons and shit. You couldn't make a better protagonist for this kind of game. Problem was, Square Enix didn't know how to make those kind of games. Although the history of Dirge of Cerberus' development is mostly shrouded in mystery, there is a lot that can be gleaned from it. The first bits of gameplay were revealed in the 2004 Tokyo Game Show, with the release date slated for 2005. First impressions believed it'd be a Devil May Cry clone, but in December of that year, Nomura insisted that the genre was still unconfirmed, even though the game had been in development for nearly 2 years at that point. Even so, he said that the game would leave many people surprised. Well, you sure as hell got that right. From there, things remained relatively quiet until E3 of the following year, where the game was notably absent from the Square Enix showcase. Its producer and former director of Final Fantasy VII, Yoshinori Kitase, later said in an interview that the team was still working on controllability, and that the game would come out whenever it was ready, which was, wasn't exactly a good look. Then, in January of 2006, Dirge of Cerberus released in Japan to very mid-reviews. But that's okay, though, because Japan, they hate shooters anyways. Shooters are for the international audience, and they're gonna, There's no two ways about it. On a technical level, this game was terrible. Aiming was slow and unintuitive, forcing you to rely on aim assist to hit your targets, and even then it wouldn't work sometimes. Enemy AI was awful, there were invisible walls everywhere, except for the places where there weren't any for some reason. The RPG elements were pretty much non-existent, and the level design ranged anywhere from uninspired to confusing. Yet, in spite of all those very, very, very glaring issues, I didn't find any of it to be an outright deal-breaker for me. Which was weird, because a game this fundamentally broken shouldn't even be playable, much less enjoyable. So, why wasn't that the case here? Square Enix had to have known they had a terrible game on their hands. Worse than that, it was a bad game so far in development that they'd have to rebuild it from scratch if they wanted to fix it. So they had to do the only thing they could in that situation, short of just scrapping it all together. They made it goo goo gaga brain dead easy. I kid you not, this is probably one of the easiest games I've ever played in my life. You have to actively try to see the game over screen, which I can't show you in any of my footage because I never died once. Not just in this recorded playthrough, but in all playthroughs I've ever had of this game. I don't even know what it looks like! Enemies have barely any health, so they die easily. If you have trouble killing them for some reason, don't worry, they barely do any damage to you. And if they do somehow deal a lot of damage to you, that's okay, because you'll be swimming in health items. But if you run out of health items, that's also fine, because the enemies drop them so often you'll find yourself burning through your potions just to free up a slot in your inventory to pick up the new ones. But if enemies aren't dropping health items, you'll be alright, because you can just buy them with all the money the game gives you. And if you run out of money, then, I don't know, maybe consider looking into a different hobby or something. And then there's the Limit Breakers. Oh my god, the Limit Breakers! Since you're playing as Vincent, you get to transform into that cool werewolf thing. Unfortunately, Frankenstein and Jason Voorhees didn't make the cut. To do that, all you gotta do is use an item called the Limit Breaker, which immediately replenishes all your HP, makes you an absolute tank, and gives you an absurdly powerful melee ability. You can also throw fireballs, and that's kinda cool. The thing is that because the game is so easy and you're already drowning in health potions, there's never a need for them. So you can just hoard limit breakers until you get to a boss fight, and then proceed to beat them into a pulp. If you run out of time and transform back though, that's okay, because you can just immediately use another one. It may sound like I'm shitting on the game, but I do legitimately believe that this was the best decision Square could have made given the circumstances. If this game had any real degree of challenge or difficulty to it, then it'd probably be one of the most frustrating experiences you can have playing a video game, because you'd be spending just as much time fighting the controls as you would be fighting the enemies themselves. But regardless of how poorly designed something is, the worst thing an easy game can be is boring. And you can compensate for boring, but you can't compensate for a game that is as frustrating as it is broken. So, without good gameplay, what exactly does Dirge of Cerberus have going for it? Aura? Although the game is badly made, that's not to say a lot of effort didn't go into making it. First off, this game is fucking gorgeous for something that came out on the PS2. I've seen PS3 games that don't look this good. The character models are pristine, and although the level design leaves much to be desired, the art direction does a great job in bringing the architecture from 7's late-stage capitalist hellscape to the next generation of consoles. The music is also pretty good. Nobuo Uematsu didn't return for this game, but in his place they brought in Masashi Hamauzu, one of his protégés, who would later go on to compose the scores for the Final Fantasy XIII games, and now is also one of the two composers on the 7 Remake series. And I think that the devs were more than aware that these areas were where the game's strong points were. So they leaned into them as much as they could. Dirge of Cerberus plays more like a movie than it does a game. Gameplay feels obligatory, and only really serves to move you from one scene to the next. I beat the game in only 8 hours, and nearly half of that was cutscenes. I don't know if being this narrative heavy was always the intent, or if it was just a consequence of Square trying to salvage a bad game, but it spares no expense on delivering some really good cutscenes. Even though most of them utilize the in-game engine, the animations and facial expressions are way better than what you'd expect for something that came out on the PS2. The only other game that comes to mind as feeling comparable would be Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. So, with all that effort they put into the game's narrative presentation, that begs the question, is the story good? How much do you like Final Fantasy VII? Dirge of Cerberus, much like Advent Children, has absolutely nothing to offer you if you're not already locked in on the series. It feels less like a story that needed to be told so much as a compulsory desire to leave no questions unanswered. One of Vincent's allures, aside from being a hot vampire anime boy, was that he's the only party member who doesn't have their backstory spelled out to the player, and what you can learn about him is left kinda vague. You never learn how or why things between him and Lucrezia didn't work out, only that they just didn't. And then it became everyone else's problem. Dirge of Cerberus tries to answer those questions, and this is something I'm of two minds on. On one hand, I get it. People want to learn all they can about the too cool for school characters like Vincent, so I see the appeal of a story like this. On the other hand, when a character's popularity is propped up by their mystique, answering too many questions might just ruin everything that made them interesting to begin with. So, did Dirge of Cerberus manage to execute this well? I sure hope it did, because otherwise this game has nothing going for it. The game starts at the very tail end of Final Fantasy VII, with Vincent and Yuffie helping rescue people in Midgar right before, the whole meteor thing happens, when they notice something unusual.
I want you to check the Mako cannon.
But we already... What the...
Just as I thought.
Hold on. Hold on! This is crazy! There's no way anybody could be up there! No!
Are we really doing this? But before Vincent can do the double tap, he has to dip once the cannon starts crumbling, destroying everything on it, with absolutely no way anyone could possibly survive it. Oh, I thought the game was about to do something really, really stupid there. So now it's 3 years later, and Vincent is still brooding, just like he always has. But everyone else seems to be having a good time. There's dancing and fireworks, and oh my god, they're absolutely massacring these people! But that's okay, because when you're as cool as Vincent Valentine, you don't become a gun violence statistic. You add to them. The first level isn't bad as far as introductory levels go, but by the time you reach the end of it, you've pretty much seen the extent of what this game has to offer you in terms of raw gameplay. The levels are simple. You run down corridors while enemies move into stationary positions where they'll shoot at you until you kill them, with no consideration for cover or evasion or any sort of counterplay beyond just ticking away at your health bar. Sometimes you'll come across barriers that require you to kill all the enemies before picking up a keycard and moving on. It probably would have just been easier to deactivate the barriers once all the enemies were dead instead of having you run around looking for that keycard you missed, but whatever. It's so easy that I don't really care. Also, for a game where your primary method of fighting is gun, the sound effects in this game are absolute weak sauce.
He's coming over here!
Anyways, after a boss fight where the cutscene makes it look way cooler than it actually is, Vincent comes face to face with some of the big shots behind the attack, who just stand there while sending out grunts on a death march towards you before dipping out. But hey, Reeve is here, so that's something!
Who are those soldiers that just left?
I don't know. The large one called himself Azul.
Azul, the Cerulean?
You're telling me this motherfucker is called Blue the Blue? Next you're gonna tell me they have someone called Red the Red.
Who the hell are you?
Rosa. Rosa the Crimson.
God damn it! Then another squad of mooks show up, so as you can expect, there's another boring combat section where... Oh shit. Did they just... No, of course he's fine. What, do you think this is the kind of game where they just suddenly kill off major characters or something? After that, Reeve drops some exposition about how the attackers are part of a mega super secret special division of soldier that Shinra had conveniently been keeping hidden the whole time.
Deep ground soldiers.
Deep ground.
Yes. The shadow of the Shinra Company, constructed by the former president, and completely hidden from the rest of the world.
Constructed. Metal Gear.
Okay, so Shinra has some super secret special elite operatives or whatever. Where the fuck were they? Yeah, I get it. Reeve says that Rufus had no idea that Deep Ground existed. But the rest of his staff did! You're telling me that while there were kaijus marching toward Midgar, and a fucking meteor was about to drop on the planet, at no point in time Scarlet thought to be like, hey boss, now might be a good time for me to mention that we have an entire city of highly trained badasses living underneath the tower. Would you like me to go grab those for you? Because if she did, then he'd have been like, hell yeah, go get them! And then we'd have to fight through an unending horde of these blue motherfuckers just to get to the Mako cannon. This is the thing about sequels that feel the need to materialize new conflicts out of the husks of their predecessors. You have to do it with some level of consideration for the setting as it already exists. It'd be one thing if Deep Ground was a squad, because at least then it gives the narrative some plausible explanation for why they didn't come up before. But Deep Ground is a whole fucking army! You can't just write in something that big as having always existed without doing a lot of retconning. That said, the game does at least give their leader a memorable introduction.
They shall be slashed, strangled, and slaughtered. Beaten, stabbed, and crushed. Garroted and impaled. Shot and executed without mercy. The time has come to cleanse this world.
Unfortunately, this is the last we'll be seeing of him until the final 30 minutes of the game, so hope that was good enough for you. What follows would probably be the worst level in the game if it wasn't so forgivably short. It starts with a turret section, followed by a semi-on-rail shooting gallery, then a boss fight that takes a whole 20 seconds to beat, and then whatever the hell this fight is supposed to be. After that, Vincent continues to Midgar, where he runs into... Oh my god! Oh my god! Are you kidding me? Holy sh... Like... I know Nomura is famous for unconventional designs, but I really gotta know what was going through his head for this one. It's like, okay, I got it. How about we put her in high heels and a cropped halter top with a mini skirt fastened to whatever the fuck this piece of fabric is supposed to be, and then we'll tie it all together by throwing her in an unbuttoned lab coat with a pair of sexy librarian glasses. Now that's good fucking character design right there. I mean, come on! She looks like she just got back from turning tricks in the Shinra Tower break room. The thing is, as much as I'm shitting on her design, she's probably the most intriguing character in the game, and that's not even a joke. Shallua, in spite of her outfit, feels like someone who would have naturally fit in as a party member in the original game. There's a lot of depth to her, and if you can look past her outfit, that depth is reflected in her design as well. The framing of her introduction ensures that the viewer is immediately made aware of her missing eye and robotic arm. But the scene doesn't linger on it. It's purely incidental, and Vincent, being the straight shooter that he is, doesn't draw attention to it because it's not important. This leaves the player intrigued, wanting to know more about her. How did she end up like this? Why did she end up like this? Does the person she's looking for have anything to do with it? We don't know. The story instead chooses to leave the player wanting to find out more. It's a small thing, but it's a really powerful writing technique for introducing characters. That's why people like Vincent are so popular to begin with. If a character can snag your attention long enough for you to get interested in them, but they don't disclose anything more than that, you're going to be sure as hell paying attention whenever they're on screen. And this would be true for Shallua if I wasn't spending the whole scene wondering, seriously, what the fuck do you even call this piece of fabric? Better yet, how is it not sliding down her leg? Is she just holding it up with her thigh? Anyways, we'll get back to her later. So Vincent guns down a bunch of Deep Ground soldiers, saves a kid, and finds out even an apocalypse, a global pandemic, and mass disappearances aren't enough to slow down Loveless's Broadway run.
Ripples form on the water's surface. The wandering soul knows no rest.
Nope, no, we ain't doing that today. Not in this video. Then Vincent runs into Red the Red, which fills his limit break gauge. Unfortunately, he gets tuckered out. While he's taking his nap, he has a flashback to the worst day of his life before waking up just in time for Shallua to drop some exposition on him.
It seems like the beast inside you went a little wild back there. This happen often?
Went wild. Do you mean chaos?
Chaos? Your body harbors the chaos gene?
Whew. Okay. So this is the part where the game has broadened its story from being about expanding on a character's vague backstory to trying to explain in-game mechanics. Most people probably didn't even know about the Chaos Limit Break on their first run of the game. Hell, most people might not have even gotten Vincent on their first run of the game. I don't find it odd that Dirge of Cerberus felt the need to expand on the nature of Vincent's Limit Break ability, but I do find it strange that they tethered it to one of the game's central plot points, and not just in a Hojo experimented on him kind of way either. Like, Chaos itself directly binds Vincent to the fate of the planet. Turns out, Chaos is one of the planet's weapons, just like Emerald and Ruby, except a lot edgier, and is intrinsically tied with another weapon called Omega, which, we'll talk about that more in a bit. Then the base gets attacked by Blue the Blue, prompting the game to shift into one of its better levels, if only because I really dig the soundtrack for it. Kinda reminds me of something out of Metal Gear Solid 2 for some reason. After literally running up and down the building, we get to have a boss fight with this kid, Shulk, who is also one of the stronger points of the game. Not her boss fight, that sucks. I'm talking about her character. Shulk is the person that Shallua has been looking for, because Shulk, it turns out, is her long-lost sister, who was kidnapped by Shinra and made into a special operative for Deep Ground. While the execution of this scene does play out like a Japanese soap opera, it still feels weirdly faithful to the setting. Look at some of the more emotional scenes from 7, and you'll realize they play out a lot like this. You have characters delivering long-winded melodramatic monologues while their friends try to talk them down, growing more desperate by the second. This, I think, is made better by the expressiveness and the animations they utilized here. Once again, this is a PS2 game, and it's obvious that the devs really put every bit of effort they could to breathe life into these characters. Not only that, but Shulk and Shallua's story feels like something right at home in the series. Everyone likes to think of Sephiroth and Jenova as the big bads of Final Fantasy VII, but the truth of it is that the real villain is, and always has been, the Shinra Corporation. Shinra destroyed towns, killed thousands of people, and ruined the lives of millions more, all for the sake of chasing endless profits, with no regard for the destruction and ruin they left behind. So, yeah, it makes sense that even 3 years later, after the company was destroyed, there'd still be some aftershocks from all the years that came before that. Unfortunately, Shulk still chooses to give into the dark side, but I guess they never bothered to make her equipment waterproof, so no harm, no foul. Anyways, it's boss fight time. Okay, so at this point you might be thinking, Reeve shot out the sprinkler head, and then it shorted out all of her equipment. So that was the game's way of telling you that during the boss fight you should shoot the sprinkler heads to, short out her equipment. Right? And if that's what your takeaway was, then congratulations! You're good at paying attention and picking up on context clues. I mean, you're wrong, because there's nothing like that in this fight. You just do the same thing you do with all of the other boss fights in this game, which is just pump them full of sedative bullets.
Use these.
Shulk? Shulk!
Don't worry. The bullets will only sedate her.
Yeah, sure thing, buddy. Once Shulk is taken care of, it's not over yet because Big Blue still wants to throw hands. And I mean, come on! Just look at how much they've hyped this guy. This one has got to be a good boss fight.
There's nowhere to run!
Riveting. So, with all the deep ground guys finally cleaned out, Vincent decides that the only way he's going to get answers is by going to where it all started. Shinra Manor.
If you wish to enter the manor in one piece, I suggest you use the sewer system extending from the old Mako reactor.
Sewer. How appropriate is that?
Why? Because this is a shitty game? So, this is the part where I would say we've arrived at the worst level of the game. But even here, the game remains so unapologetically easy that the hardest thing about it is figuring out how to navigate it. But this game will not be so easily dissuaded by my abnormally high tolerance for bad game design, because right when things start to get kinda interesting, we've got a mandatory stealth section. Between this and the turret sections, it's kinda crazy how ahead of the curve Square Enix was when it came to pioneering future gaming trends. Even their bad games were innovating on new and creative ways to be terrible. After brutally botching what could have just been a cutscene, we finally get to see what Deep Ground is doing with all the people they've been kidnapped. What the fuck is that?
What in the blazes is growing down there?
Usher of souls. My brother. Omega.
Huh, let me guess. Your name is Black the Black, isn't it?
It's Nero the Sable!
How'd I know? How'd I fucking know? Back at Shinra Manor, Lucrezia's character AI model sends Vincent out looking for some old research papers about Omega. And I'll give credit where it's due. It is kind of neat to be able to wander around some of the familiar areas of Shinra Manor. But what fun there might have been in sightseeing has to be put on hold when Red the Red shows up and goads Vincent into chasing her. Which ends about as well as one would expect at the midpoint of a game.
I'm sorry. Were you not expecting?
It's alright though, because Yuffie is here to save the day.
Would I flee?
So while all that's going on, Vincent is back in Flashback Land, getting to relive the other worst day of his life.
If you have something to say, say it.
Are you sure this is what you really want?
Am I sure? Am I sure? If this only concerns me, then yes, I am sure.
Oh. I just...
I feel it's worth noting this was a scene that caused a lot of controversy at the time. As I said before, Vincent's backstory in the original leaves a lot to interpretation, and one of the consequences of answering a question whose answer was previously left to the discretion of the viewer is that it's inevitably going to challenge the perception of the viewer in a way that they're probably not going to like. And even then, with the context of the other scenes, it makes Lucrezia come across really bad here. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. What we learn later is that the root of Lucrezia's issues comes from her own ambitions indirectly causing the death of her mentor, who was also Vincent's father. Although she wants to be close to Vincent, she creates a barrier between them, because even though he makes her happy, he also serves as a constant reminder of her greatest failure, not just as a scientist, but as a human being. Vincent is able to look past this and even forgive her for it, but she isn't able to forgive herself, so she seeks to sabotage their relationship in whatever way she can. Yeah, it is a flawed perspective, but let's face it, Lucrezia is a flawed character. It's really easy to see Lucrezia in the light of being a victim, because in many ways, she is. She was plagued with visions of all the horrible things her son would do, but since he was taken away from her at birth, not only was she deprived of being a mother, but she was also deprived of the power to be able to prevent that dark future from happening. But the thing is, she is ultimately the one who gave up Sephiroth to the Genova Project. It's made very clear that she wasn't coerced into it, and that she fully consented to the entire procedure. It takes a very specific kind of person to be able to put their own child on the line in the name of science, and Lucrezia, like it or not, is that type of person. I'm not saying she's evil, but she is easily blinded by ambition. And if she's prone to making poor decisions for the sake of scientific research, then it stands to reason that she's also prone to making poor decisions around her interpersonal relationships as well. So, as much as I can understand why people were upset with this portrayal of Lucrezia, I think the truth of it is that those people were lamenting a version of Lucrezia that only existed in their heads. But enough of all that serious stuff. Look! Yuffie is being adorable!
Yuffie Kisaragi! Feast your eyes on... Whoa! Whoa! Ow! Ow!
Back at the ranch, Shulk has woken up from her nap. But so is Big Blue. Vincent arrives to save the day, but... Wait, hold on. Zoom in. More. Is that a buckle? Huh. So that's how she keeps that thing on. Jokes aside, this is one of the more meaningful moments in the game. Shalua, who broke and destroyed her own body in her quest to find Shulk, props open a closing door with her mechanical arm to give her sister time to escape. And then the door continues to close in on it, crushing it, destroying it. It's actually a really cool bit of visual storytelling. Shalua dedicated her entire life to saving Shulk, losing pieces of herself along the way. Then, in this final, pivotal moment, she even sacrifices the parts of herself that have been replaced. She literally gives all of herself and more to save her sister. And I really do think that this is one of the most impactful scenes in the game.
Why did she? Why? Shalua.
Or at least it would be if we didn't find out she was in a coma in the very next scene. I don't know if this was a case of the lead writer, Hiroki Chiba, not wanting to kill off his darlings or something, or if it's because they had some larger plans for Shalua in the future. But by the end of the game, she's still in a coma, and since this is chronologically the last game in the setting, she's basically dead. It's actually really frustrating when they do this sort of shit. Yo, is that a fucking airship? Oh, hell yes. We are so fucking back. Yeah, call it fan service if you want, but I'm a fan and I am considering myself serviced. Literally, this entire segment could have just been one big cutscene. You really don't do anything here other than just walk around from dialogue to dialogue, but the fact that you can walk around the airship in what were, at the time, modern graphics, is a reward in and of itself to me. Could they have just cut all this to dedicate resources to making the gameplay better? Probably. Should they have done that? Also probably. But they didn't. So I'm just going to enjoy it while I can. Anyways, we learned that Shulk, rather conveniently, had Lucrezia's memories implanted into her when she was still with Deep Ground, meaning that she can decipher all the data Vincent found in Shinra Manor. And the prognosis is, not good.
Anything that has definite shape will one day cease to exist. The same is true for this world. Before she takes her final breath, the pure life streams that flow freely beneath her crust will be brought together into one.
Wait, hold on. That sounds really familiar.
By Omega, the ultimate life form. His purpose? To gather all life, sentient and non, and lead it into the sea of stars, where it will embark on a fabulous journey along a road untraveled.
So Genova?
However, when Omega has lifted the life from this planet, all that will remain will be an empty shell destined to die silently in the limitless void of space.
Yeah, no, that's literally Genova. I don't have a problem with them revisiting old themes, but this is basically just a one-for-one of Genova. Like, I get that they're different in the sense that Genova wants to absorb the life stream for herself, while Omega wants to shepherd it away. But does that difference really mean all that much for the people who are still alive? Unless, is this supposed to imply that Genova was actually an Omega from a different planet that crash-landed on this planet, or... I don't know. Oh, hey, look! Cloud's on that bitchin' motorcycle from the movie! Oh, and look, it's Barrett! And Tifa, too! We got the whole gang here! Except for Red 13! Seriously. Where's Red? We've got this whole big final battle thing going on, and we just, forgot about everyone's favorite cat dog thing? Oh, hey, Red, there you are! Uh-oh, wait. Wrong Red. Guess it's time for another bad boss fight. With Red the Red taken care of, that just leaves Big Blue and Black the Edgy, the latter of which is busy kidnapping Shulk, so naturally it's time for Vincent and Blue to square off again. You know, this guy actually would be mildly challenging if limit breakers weren't so busted. Oh wait, what's that? A second phase? Oh, now we're really and limit breaker is still OP. At least the cutscene is pretty metal. Vincent throws the dude's own gun through his chest and then shoots him with a big-ass laser. It's awesome. It may sound like I'm blazing through this right now, but that's because, honestly, there isn't anything else I can say about the gameplay at this point. I meant it when I said that the first level pretty much shows you all that Dirge of Cerberus has to offer in terms of gameplay. All the levels up to this point have been exactly the same. Save for 2 or 3 special enemy types that sometimes show up here and there, this is really it. It's only here at the 11th hour of the game that they introduce an enemy type that actually makes you change up your playstyle, because they're immune to bullets. But these enemies feel more annoying than engaging, like they're just dragging out the level longer than it needs to be. So finally, we reach Black the Edgy, and his fight has a neat idea to it, but once again, he's too fucking easy. After saving Shulk, we're able to fight Black the Edgy for realsies, and... this boss fight. This boss fight right here is the perfect example of everything that is wrong with this game. There's so much love and detail that went into this. The enemy design, the environment, the atmosphere, the music, it's all great. But the boss fight is just so bad. I really don't know how else better to explain it other than just showing you a full, unedited clip of the boss fight's second phase. You know, the phase that's supposed to be like the climax of the fight.
My brother, he is my only
with that out of the way, we've now reached the final leg of the game, and this is where everything gets really, really, really dumb.
3 years ago, while I was still running about looking for Sephiroth, I took it upon myself to distribute my data, my mind, my knowledge, my inner being, across the worldwide network. And even though my body had died, and the world had been left in ruin, I survived in a virtual reality. When the network was restored, the scattered data regrouped and I was reborn. A neo-reunion, you could say. You. That's right, boy! It's me!
That's right, Hojo is alive! He done went and pantheoned himself. While I wouldn't put this sort of thing past Hojo, that doesn't mean it makes it any less stupid. Narratively speaking, Vincent gets his closure back at the Mako canon. There isn't anything else to be gained here except maybe the satisfaction of beating Hojo's ass again. Secondly, the story could have just as easily played out the way it did without Hojo here. Everyone in Deep Ground is under the impression that Weiss is the one calling the shots, and are all on board with the whole Omega Doomsday plan. So why not just have Weiss actually be the one orchestrating the whole thing? Why cram in a secondary villain from the original game as a big bad for this one? And thirdly, none of this even matters, because after Nero helps Weiss regain control of himself, Weiss decides to just go through with the Omega plan anyways. What was the point of this? Why dig up a dead villain if you don't actually have anything meaningful for them to do? But what matters now is that Omega is awake, and since Vincent doesn't have the materia controlling Chaos anymore, things aren't looking too good for, well, anybody. But with the help of Shulk and Lucrezia's, ghost? Memories? Computer program? I don't know. Vincent is able to see the light and regain control over Chaos. Not only that, but his friends are all there cheering him on, except Red. And it's really exciting, and cool, and damn it, this game is getting me hyped again. Oh, and we've got a J-Rock song playing too? Yep, we've done it. We have reached peak anime levels of hype. Although it took us 8 hours and an entire game to get here, it does finally feel good to play at least. Or at least compared to everything that came before. You get to use Death Penalty, which is fucking sick because it shoots out big-ass explosions that don't care if your aim assist is off or not. Maneuverability is significantly less stiff as well, and the open nature of the level makes the camera much easier to manage. Mostly. Once you reach Omega's core, the game realizes it might as well just drop all pretenses at this point and just goes full DBZ mode. And it's cool! But all the hype in the world can't save you from a bad boss fight. Which is actually kinda okay here because the boss fight isn't that bad. Thanks to the large scale of the map, it actually utilizes the space to get at least a little creative with its attacks. It's still easy, but it's not entirely brain dead. I sincerely do wish there were more positive things I could say about it, though. Although Omega is defeated, it's still too late. The process of gathering the life stream has already begun, so Vincent does the only thing he can. He channels all the power of Chaos to completely destroy Omega, along with himself.
Vincent?
And that was Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. And, of course, Vincent's not dead. If they couldn't go through with killing off Shalua, did anyone really think Vincent was in line for the chopping block? Yeah, not a chance. In an after-credit sequence, we get to see, wait, holy shit, it's Red! There you are, buddy! Where have you been? Out of all the endings of Final Fantasy VII products, this one probably has the most closure out of all of them. Compared to the abrupt ending of the original, Dirge's ending actually feels pretty complete. Vincent is ready to move on, Shulk is ready to live her own life, and unless Shinra has another hidden city of super soldiers buried somewhere, they're probably done and over with too. I'd like to say that it's a good note for the franchise to end on, but it's left a bit sour from being delivered by such a horrendously bad game. And in spite of all that, I still can't help but like this game. There's this notable level of sincerity in it that makes it hard to dislike. You don't have to look hard to see the level of effort that went into it, and it feels less like a game that came out bad because of laziness, but rather out of a team simply lacking experience in the genre. And the game clearly had some level of impact, so much that they even brought Deep Ground back in the remake trilogy to a widely positive reception. And I'm excited to see how they choose to wrap up that plot thread in the final game. It would have been so easy for this game to be scrapped considering all the trouble they must have faced in development, but they decided to stick it out and delivered a deeply flawed but also very memorable game. And that was Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. It may be garbage, but it's my garbage. Now, if you're wondering if you should play the game too, then no. Don't do it. Just watch the cutscene video on YouTube. Just don't play this game. It's really, really bad. And unless you are an absolute fucking freak like me, you will hate every single second you spend playing it. It is the most fundamentally broken action RPG I've ever played in my life. Till next time, guys!
If you must be run now, as if we must be forever.